Twilight Gets a Puppy. By TDR. Chapter 49. Loup Before You Sleep. Part 3. Golden Oaks Library. Rarity and Applejack sat in the hall, mostly silent. Rarity had taken it upon herself to try and right the bed and clean up the damage that was done to the wall when Twilight flung it out with them. The white mare looked at the book that had been thrown out with them and sighed, casting a spell to mend a few of the rumpled pages. Given Twilight's love of books, she was beyond upset. Applejack was the first to speak. "So we done goofed," the orange mare sighed. "Clearly." Rarity agreed. "Was worried about this happening too. She was too eager with it. We both shoulda left and let Pinkie Pie or Fluttershy help with her first slumber party." Applejack sighed. "Shoulda known we couldn't get along the whole time. Indeed, she might have been upset with us for refusing, but it would have been better than this." Rarity sighed. "She couldn't have known how we react when dealing with each other. Why is that anyway? Ya fuss at me for being messy, but you're fine with Pinkie Pie who wears as much cake as she eats?" Applejack questioned. "I could ask the same of you. You seem quite content with Fluttershy despite her being as picky and demure as I am." Rarity questioned, not meeting Applejack's gaze at the question. Applejack turned away, looking down at the ground, her hat tipping over her eyes. "Doesn't really matter. We gotta figure a way to make this up to Twilight. She's pissed at both of us and it don't feel right leaving her here alone like this. I expect she might develop another complex from this if we leave her be." Rarity frowned. "I hate feeling like I need to walk on eggshells around her. She ain't that bad from what I've seen. It's just when she's set off hard. We just need to fix this before we gotta explain to Spike and Ross we screwed up their sister more." Applejack grumbled. "Should probably ask how they deal with her episodes too. We are in agreement of that, so long as this agreement doesn't involve any spit," Rarity scoffed. "You still on about that?" "I will be for a while. That was disgusting. It's an old way of sealin' a deal." Applejack snorted. "For bigger deals blood used to be involved, but that practice fell out a long time ago. I have no idea what to do with that information." Rarity considered. "Well, done worry about it then and help me come up with some way to fix this." Applejack rolled her eyes. "I already have, darling." Rarity smiled. "So help me if it's prettifying something," Applejack muttered. "Stuff it a moment, hayseed, and let me talk." Rarity snapped. Applejack raised an eyebrow at the outburst but let it slide. "Right, sorry, sort of. The simple fact is we will just have to redo all of this and make sure it all goes as Twilight's book says. If we can get the others involved as well, it will seem a bigger deal and perhaps it will ease her issue with this first one." "Not bad. But that done help us in the now." Applejack considered. "Maybe we can convince her to go down her list again tonight. Plenty of night left provided we done worry bout sleep. Maybe we can still fix this first one." Rarity pondered a moment before nodding and picking up the checklist book. "Doable. We simply need to make sure we don't get right back to each other's throats. Hard enough when we annoy each other use by being us." "Indeed. Perhaps if we take parts of the list and each do something from it." Rarity offered, looking at the list. "Oh my, there's a number of things in here other than having fun not checked off." "Really?" Applejack blinked, looking over Rarity's shoulder. "I done think talking about colts is something we should get into." "What, don't want to find out who Twilight is interested in?" Rarity smirked. "Not really. That's her business, less it's some pony one of us is also interested in." Applejack shrugged. "Since she don't seem that type to go after a prince and I ain't got time to be swooning over some stallion, that pretty much leaves nothing going on in that conversation." "I concede that point. I expect most of the cooking things would be your skill set, which would leave all of the glamour things for me." "Reasonable enough. What else did she skip?" "Gossip at, spin ta bottle, ain't that a mixed party game, solve mysteries with a large dog, well Ross ain't here, I can see why that was skipped." Overthrow the government. Applejack read surprised. Where on Ekis did she get this sleepover book? Rarity muttered. Before either of them could question the list further, a crack of thunder shook the tree house. This was quickly followed by a loud crash from the next room and a shriek. Twilight! The pair of them shouted, rushing to the door. Rarity tried to open it only to find it locked. Before she could fret over it, Applejack shoved her out of the way and whirled about, planting both hooves just under the knob with a hard double kick that broke the latch and sent the door swinging open with a crash. Looking into the room was a complete disaster. The main window had been smashed open and the top of a tree now filled the room. Rain was flooding in through the broken window and pooling on the floor. "Where's Twilight?" Rarity cried out, looking around. "Here!" Applejack called, flipping Twilight's bed over, showing the mare curled up and muttering to herself. "Uh-oh!" Rarity winced. "Crap, not again!" Applejack muttered. "Did the same thing going after that dragon." Rarity, you remember what Ross did to get her to calm down? "I recall part of it, but I don't know what he said." "I don't speak in woofs." Rarity called back, her magic gathering a number of things that had been knocked off shelves when the tree broke the window. Applejack held her tongue, wanting very much to make a comment about how Rarity bitched enough to speak canine, but for the moment they needed to focus. "Right, well, let's worry about what we can deal with. Help me get that tree back out that window." "What?" "No, it's wet and sappy and covered in mud." Rarity whined. "It's a tree top, how the heck would it be covered in mud?" Applejack snapped, looking at the tree and noticing that it was completely covered in mud. "What the hey, it's covered in mud." "I told you." Rarity scoffed. "Maybe it bounced off the ground." Applejack snorted, slipping under the tree to try and push the tree top out with little luck. "Rarity, give me a hoof here." "I am." Rarity fussed, her horn glowing, a number of the branches popping off and forming small dancing pony figures. Applejack frowned at the mare's reluctance to touch the tree, but the more of the little figures she made, the lighter the tree became, until Applejack could simply shove the rest of it out the window. "Well, that's part one. Done. Suppose your fancy magic can fix that window." "I'm afraid that's beyond my skill." Rarity frowned. "All right. See what ya can do 'bout Twilight. I think I saw a tarp in tha basement. I can use that to cover the hole." Applejack sighed, darting out of the room. Rarity looked at Twilight, who was sitting still and rocking a little, her tail being worried between her four hooves as she muttered to herself. When her plan to deal with the dragon had fallen apart all the way up the mountain, she had had a similar reaction, though Ross had gotten her to recover from that fairly quickly with a hug and a little talk. Rarity had no idea what it was that Ross had said, but it worked. Still, if Twilight snapped out of it, Rarity was certain that her friend knew the proper spell to fix her own window. Still, she wasn't sure how to snap her out of it quickly. No, wait, she did know, her novels told her how to do that. There was almost always a hysterical mare, and they were always calmed the same way. Whack! Twilight recoiled from the slap, whipping her head and glaring up at Rarity. "You hit me!" Twilight accused. "I did, you were freaking out." Rarity agreed. "You're not supposed to hit someone having an episode. It doesn't do anything but hurt the pony having the fit. And yet here you are reprimanding me for that very thing that doesn't work." Rarity smiled. "What? No, it didn't. Agrrr, you sound like Ross and Spike." Twilight growled, rubbing her cheek. "Well, I admit I wasn't sure it would work." Rarity admitted. "But it seemed to work in this book I read." "Book? What medical book says slap them?" Twilight fumed. Not a medical book per se." Rarity replied sheepishly. "It was The Wolf of the Harvest Moon." "That trashy romance novel?" Twilight demanded. "Well, I wouldn't call it trashy, it has won a number of awards despite its age." Rarity protested. "But we can have a book discussion later, I think there are other things to worry about now." Rarity looked back at the room and the mess within it, rain still coming in the broken window and pooling on the floor. Where did all the little pony figures come from? Twilight asked, looking at the small topiary figures still sitting around the room. And the mud? Do you like them? And honestly, I'm not sure of the mud. Where is Applejack? Rarity frowned, her magic gathering a few of the books and other knickknacks up that the water was threatening, putting them on the bed away from the window. You're both still here? Twilight questioned. Rarity glanced back and noticed Twilight simply staring blankly at the mess, one of her ears twitching. This wasn't an expression she was familiar with. Twilight had gotten herself stuck in a loop of thoughts. There was too much to do and she couldn't start doing one thing without doing something else. Included in this mental loop was her thought to apologize to Rarity and Applejack for her outburst and throwing them out, but that loop came back around to it being their fault she had that breakdown. She knew she had freaked out when the tree broke into the window, though she was already on the verge of a breakdown after she started thinking about how the slumber party went. The tree just set it off by adding more problems than she could deal with to it and making her lock up. That same loop was starting to take hold again and her brain was trying to get her to focus on anything else, like the figures. Twilight dear, I don't suppose you might be able to fix the window. I'm afraid I don't have a spell to repair something of that size. Rarity questioned. A tear or a fabric split would be no issue, maybe even a broken pair of scissors, but this is a bit beyond me. Rarity blinked as there seemed to be a small spark in Twilight's eyes as her ears perked back up. The purple mare had evidently just been given a focal point and was looking like her usual self. Rarity made a note of that. It's not really that different. I take it you use a variation of Mordenkainen the Grey Hawk's Marvelous Mend? Well, the principles of the larger scale or the mass Marvelous Mend are the same. The main difference is the multitude of materials that it can be used on. While the minor version of the spell can generally focus on one material due to the mana flow, more than one material can be altered with the larger spell, Twilight lectured. Rarity blinked, watching as Twilight went full on lecture mode. Her horn glowed brightly as bits and pieces of the broken window were gathered up along with a few of her pony topiary sculptures for spare parts that might have fallen outside to the ground below and gotten lost. The gathered pieces merged and flowed much like water as they reattached to the window frame. While I prefer to use water as a form of repair, because it allows a greater malleability of movement and getting some of the smaller details and is easier to manipulate when one thinks that the final stage of the water will be its solid form, and even though ice melts when used to manipulate normally solid objects. Ponder Stubbins, reader of invisible writings, theorized this was due to the nature of matter wanting to remain at rest in its natural shape. He was of course ridiculed by his superiors at the time, who didn't care how it worked so long as it did. The lecture continued as Twilight finished the window frame's repair and reinstalled a newly reformed, though with slightly fewer glass panels, window. Rarity blinked at the repaired window, the action of it seemingly have reset her friend as Twilight had continued the repairs, her magic drawing the water up into the air. A light pop teleport a mop bucket and a mop, likely from a downstairs closet, as the water was wrung into it. Through the whole thing Twilight had yet to stop talking, and Rarity was learning more about the color of magic than she ever really wanted to know. Asterisk. Well, I guess we don't need the tarp. Applejack stated, looking at the repaired window and the room that Rarity and Twilight were working on cleaning still. Applejack, where have you been? Rarity scoffed. Floor was leaking and falling into the library itself. Applejack explained, watching Twilight tense up. Ease up, sugar cube, I took care of it. Got a bunch of pots from the kitchen to collect the water and moved a bunch books. None of 'em really got any water on 'em, but I put the ones on the top shelves on the return desk if ya wanna check 'em out later. Chwee. Applejack blinked as the purple mare rushed down the stairs past her to check on the books. Or now's fine too. Applejack sighed. That was an attention to detail I didn't expect out of you. Rarity scoffed. Yeah, well, if I'd left them there'd have been more damage, though I guess I didn't need that many pots if the window's fixed. Applejack shrugged. So what did I miss? I might have figured out a few things about our friend here for next time she has an issue. Seems if there's not a clear goal or objective she locks up. But once she has a task she will single-mindedly do it. Rarity smirked. Sound familiar? Shush. Applejack snorted. You managed to talk to her about the idea? No, perhaps we should go down there and do that now. I doubt any of us are going to go back to sleep anytime soon after all this excitement. Yeah, probably not. Applejack agreed. Asterisk. It took a bit of convincing and more than a few apologies, but Twilight was willing to start the slumber party over again. The fact the three of them were a mess from dealing with the treetop and water made the makeovers go a bit easier, though Applejack refrained from allowing the others to get too fancy with her this time. Rarity as well was slightly less meticulous when the snacks came up again. The pillow fight was skipped after Twilight's display of skill last time, and the Truth or Dare dissolved into a embarrassing teasing session when Twilight chose Truth and Rarity asked her if there was anyone she fancied since coming to Ponyville. Applejack was less than thrilled with the answer, though Rarity loved it. Twilight simply buried her head under her pillow and ended the game. Of course the horror stories were taken over by Applejack as she told some of the campfire stories from some of the camping trips she, Rainbow, and Apple Bloom went on. So the next morning when the pony woke, he looked around the cabin where he had been spending the night and didn't see a single creepy picture, all he saw were windows. Applejack stated, looking at the two unicorns hanging on her every word. The boom of thunder made the treehouse shake at a perfect dramatic moment, causing the other two mares to scream out. Of course Applejack didn't anticipate the front door being flung open at 2 am with a second flash of lightning showing a massive figure glistening as the light flashed behind it. All three of them screamed out as the thunder from the lightning sounded. Blue and Purple Magic grabbed a coat rack and a stool, flinging them at the shadowy form as Applejack bucked the table towards the figure. There was a questioning sound from the figure before the impact of the furniture flung the shadowy form back out into the storm with a wet splat. The girls paused, blinking in a moment of silence as the door swung on its hinges. See, this is why I open doors from the side. Just in case there's a trap or someone ready to attack, stated a young voice. ONO does teach survival skills. Spike? Twilight asked as the little dragon poked his head in the door, carefully making sure nothing else was going to be flung at the door. Oh hey Twilight! Didn't expect you'd still be awake. And Rarity and Applejack too. Spike muttered. That explains why three things hit him. That was Ross. Why are you back home? Twilight demanded, darting to the door. We took the red eye from Canterlot. The princesses are both out doing some ambassadorial stuff and we sure as heck weren't gonna stay at Mom and Dad's. Spike explained, stepping inside, the water dripping off his scales rapidly drying as the heat from his body turned it to steam. Rarity and Applejack moved to the door along with Twilight, peering out into the rain only to quickly move back as Ross stepped inside with a frown. The navy blue canine was soaked and coated in mud. He tossed the coat rack and chair to the side, having carried them back inside, though he wasn't bothering with the table. He looked down at Twilight, Applejack, and Rarity with a frown, mud and water dripping from his muzzle down his now even more tattered coat and fur. Ross, are you okay? I'm sorry about that, it was just Applejack was telling a ghost story and then you came in, Twilight began. Bork. Ross cursed, then he smiled, the expression confusing the mares. Spike, however, took a step behind the still open door, keeping it between him and his brother as the large canine dropped to all fours between the three confused ponies. What are you? Oh no. No RAHS, wait. Twilight yelled just as Ross started to shake all the water and mud from himself, showering the three mares in the foyer of the library. Author's note. Not sure why this chapter caused me so much annoyance and effort. But it did. Took some liberties with the whole tree scenario. Given the random nature of lightning strikes, this very well could have happened anyway. Also, I seem to have a differing setup about how the library is built than show canon. Also, the mud was an oddity in show canon too, the tree top was soaked in it, which made zero sense. Now, all that said, I have decided that I am going to do a story AMA on Discord here before too long. I'd say at some point in January, probably the end of it. I'll try to cover both cis and T-gap questions. More details as I come up with them. End author's note. End chapter 49. Loup before you sleep. Part 3.